We already have a product, paying customers, and it all started last October. We'd been co-working out of Capital Factory, but we saw the Air Force moving in to the office below. I thought there might be some money on that tree if I shook it a little bit. But more than that, I was just curious, like, okay, what's the Air Force doing here? I'm going to knock on their door. So I did that, met Jen Mars, who you work with, said, hey, we're already working with the largest police force in the country, largest employer in Texas. Can I pitch you guys?
So can you talk about Jen Mars's role and what's, I guess, interesting about her role and how it plays in this whole DoD ecosystem?
I don't know her official title.
Okay. So Jen Mars is on our team. So in AFWERX Austin, the majority of us and how we manned it is actually the Texas Guard. So the biggest player that has helped with a lot of these phase one companies and helping the business development has been utilizing the reserves and guards. Because as we were mentioning earlier today, is when we first started this, active duty, they were very hesitant to even talk to companies. They didn't even know what SBIR stood for. They've never heard of it before. They didn't know if they could legally talk to someone, even if we convinced them that they could talk to someone that was under SBIR contract. They didn't know what the nature of the conversation, what they could sign, and then trying to get them to sign an MOU is very difficult. Where if you can imagine, the reserves and guard is a whole ecosystem out there where they own all the infrastructure where they're at. They own the planes. They own the equipment. And they're more willing to try out things. So very early on, we were matching companies up to the Guard to help facilitate a lot of this business development. So Jen immediately said, hey, the Texas Guard is actually working with these other agencies. Sure, we would love to do this. Because what's special, can you talk a little bit about your product and why? And this is one of the things I want y'all to think about is what is your customer profile in the commercial sector? What makes it unique? And then start thinking, okay, what in the DoD, active duty, reserves, and guard makes it more advantageous to go after that market? And you'll understand what he does, why it would make more sense with the guard and reserve.
So on the commercial side, with the largest employer in Texas, we're trying to keep their insurance rates down and their employees healthy. With the largest police force, trying to keep the officers fit for duty, which leads to my point with reserve and guard. The problem that we identified in phase one, and we were hopeful before this was a problem, but reserve and guard are only seen on base about once per month. When they are on base, there's a ton of stuff you guys are trying to knock out. Physical fitness is just, one of those things. So using our commercial technology, our hope, was that we could implement it with a unit and allow commanders to kind of keep track of their unit's fitness and also motivate it using kind of these wearable devices and software that we've built on top of it to gamify it.
Yeah, so in Guard and Reserves, they have a lot of different challenging problems that active duty doesn't have. They're very spread out. People are coming in from civilian jobs to their reserve or guard job, and they still need to maintain the same standards as active duty that has constant availability to do that. Some other challenges is usually organizations by location handle their own house. So where active duty, you can cover everyone. A unit here in San Antonio, or a unit at Laughlin, or a unit of Dallas are going to handle their own bunch and not really talk to each other. So that it was very useful for his type of product to go after that first. And then so he's working that prototype in the phase two, that adaptation more of implementing that, and then now we're trying to find those on-ramps to active duty for them of utilizing that. Because guess what? People deploy. People still have to maintain fitness standards and all that as well. And he actually has some capability where it's not going to put your GPS coordinates and publish it out to everyone of what your base looks like in a austere location. So those are things that I want to look at. So Pat, will you please also talk about, when you talked to Jen, who did she introduce you to? How did you start navigating the relationships and then finding someone to understand what you were actually trying to do?
Sure. So this is just one thing I'm going to say to everyone here, at least was an apprehension on my end, was, you look at the military and government, it's a mammoth organization. It's a bureaucracy of bureaucracies, okay? But at the end of the day, people make up this bureaucracy, and creating a human connection was really what made us successful, I'd say. We're a small company. We'd never even stepped into these waters, but I did create a powerful human connection with Jen by walking by y'all's office and establishing eye contact every day when I walked in during my phase 1. But through that, I was able to ask a lot of questions and get answers. But you can't be a jerk either. Like, you have to have some finesse there. So, I'd say in our phase 1, we didn't have any event like this. So all the phase 1s here are already like light years ahead. Create a relationship. I don't think you can buy anyone a beer because that'd be illegal. But, these are people. And you can create a relationship, so do that.
So Pat touched on a couple of things that very early on, and I mentioned that this morning, as we are like, we'll just we'll leverage the entrepreneur spirit of the startups to just navigate through DoD. And thought it was like, it seemed like a good idea, but a lot of startups, as aggressive y'all would cold call these organizations and be like, "You must hear my products. Why aren't you listening?" And so so they were taken aback by a lot of this. So we understood that we had to generate pathways for conversation. So the way he was able to navigate it is he started just going to person on a continuous, rigorous base of who would listen, who would hear the pitches. When did you decide? When did you find out? Okay, this person to walk us through on trying to get that MOU and explain what the MOU to them is, how you talked about it and discussed it with the Air Force user.
Yeah, so there is no LinkedIn for the military. Hate to break it to you. I use regular LinkedIn,
but they will start.
Had horrible results with it, but you guys can try. But there are events like this now, which is great. So eventually I found someone that could really champion what we were doing. And Jen kind of put me in contact with him. And Alex Goldberg, Stoicky, I'm gonna give him kind of the credit with really quarterbacking it. And he found those end users for us. So.
Yeah, I just want to interject real quick. So Stoicky, you probably haven't met him. He's actually here, and if you could have a chance to introduce yourself and talk to him, highly recommend it. He's one of those people that is an entrepreneur in his mindset. He will just, if he believes in you, if he thinks it's a good idea, he'll just go over whatever barrier. So Pat got lucky and found him. So he's like, we'll make this happen. So he'll talk to. So when you're navigating and talk to people, assess the people that you're talking to. Like, do they really have the drive to get this done, to get it what you need to do? And you'll be able to figure that out. Do they have the network? Do they, can they start? Are they making connections for you? If it's good to be cordial and nice, but start moving on to other people that you may need, or ask us to make introductions on that as well. So talk about, what was the time frame from when Stoicky said, yes, I want to do this MOU, to when you actually had a signed MOU? And this is one I want to hit on your phase 1s. You don't have a lot of time. We cut this one a little bit short because of timing. I don't know if y'all remember that we actually was supposed to be due in June, and then we shifted it. Well, that's going to hurt y'all on the back end. Your performance period will still be the same, but the phase 2 applications are going to be due earlier, if you haven't realized that. 23 October, that's when they're due. So it gives you shorter amount of time, and I want really Pat to hit home that this MOU getting it signed, some organizations, and I'll add to what he says, may take a long time. And I'll explain some other difficulties with that. Go ahead.
So you really want me to?
Say it.
Yeah. So as great of a quarterback and advocate as Stoichi was, we didn't get that MOU until the night before our phase 2 was due.
What do you think caused that? Like, what do you think in that process?
So
you still had to convince people, or was it a process of actually getting the signature?
yeah, just actually getting the signature on the freaking piece of paper.
So I want to get you, so this is, I'll get to you in a second. So the higher you go up as an Air Force customer, they're going to have a process that they need to route it through to get to that high level. That adds time, and I'm talking weeks. I had a couple of companies that went through that whole process, and they were coming up to the deadline, and the user dropped out, and the customer dropped out at the last minute. And they're like, just can't sign it on you. They called in desperation to us. We managed to get them signed with someone, but you can imagine what that phase 2 package is going to look like. It's not going to be as great as you wanted. So we want you to hit that and start having those conversations. That's why we're doing these events with people who can sign those MOUs, that you need to start pressing them like, hey, is this something you want to go down to? Talk to multiple people. Just don't talk to one and say, until someone signs, it's just like getting money from an investor. You're trying to get the money from every investor, but until someone actually gives you that money, until someone actually signs that MOU, you're not done in trying to get that application. Anything else to add on that process?
Get them to sign on the line that is dotted. Coffee is for closers.
Yes. What did the MOU say? What did your MOU? Yeah, go ahead and talk. Please talk about how you negotiated and what, because there is a template that we provide. You can deviate a little bit from the template to talk further about what they're going to do in the phase 2. So go ahead.
So we had the opportunity to actually go down to the base and meet with our lead, signer, the 149th Fighter Wing. And in that meeting and beyond it, worked again with the champion to really kind of write out everything in there. I proposed the milestones. They checked off on it, but it was like a collaborative effort. But I will say, they've signed more than one of these, so they were able to bring that expertise in knowing kind of what should be on there, which was helpful.
Any questions on the MOU? Please start. Yeah, so I'll answer that. So great question. So say for tomorrow, at this event, you find someone that says, I want to give you $100,000 to leverage for phase 2. For this fiscal year money, they can send that to AFWERX, who controls SBR right now, and obligate that money. Or some other, through the system, some organizations don't always prefer MIPR, but yes. Yes, they can do that. What we have is they need to provide documentation saying we will commit $100,000 at the application of phase 2. Once, if you are awarded a contract for phase 2, they need to deliver those funds within 90 days. So it technically could be the next fiscal year money. Say they say we anticipate having money in the next fiscal year. We just don't have any now. We'll go ahead and sign a letter of support saying, hey, we will provide this money. We put it, then they'll just have 90 days. And those are what the contracts are going to have it where they're options. So you'll have a base minimum where you will get. And that will become a little bit more that you'll have to talk to us about as far as the milestones and providing possibly milestones, de-scoped milestones, just in case funding, especially with the private. If private falls through, then you may want, and don't do what some companies do. If you write a milestones for, you're getting a 1.5 million from a private and 1.5 million for SIBR, essentially you're doing a $3 million worth of work. So if that money falls through and you just change some dollar amounts on your milestones, the contracting officer is going to go, well, you didn't even change your scope of work. You were supposed to be doing 3 million and now you're just doing, this amount that de-scoped. So don't do that, because I ran into that a couple of times in Boston. Any other questions on milestones? Yes. No. So that's what for the rapid and leverage funds, there is no min and max. It's only a max of how much SBIR dollars are leveraged. So what units are starting to do and offices are starting to do is leverage our contract and the speed that we can deliver the contract to pile on extra money for those contracts. And that's what we're doing. We awarded about a handful of those this last go. Yes. Can you talk about IP protection? Yes. I'm glad. Thanks for asking that. That's always a big issue. And if you're ever hesitant on this question and I don't provide you a sufficient answer, I will put you in contact with the head IPGC lawyer for the Air Force. She is a part of AFWERX. She's the liaison with AFWERX, and she does patent law, and she can explain all this in detail. Here's the basic thing is, whatever is yours now that you're coming in with, that's yours. I mean, there's really no reason to assert data rights in phase 1 because you're not developing anything. So what will happen in phase 2 is we'll ask, what data rights are you asserting? There's a table, and you'll outline every particular item that you want to assert data rights on. And then that will become a negotiation as far as a discussion with the contracting officer and the technical team of as far as what you want to assert, and just to make sure, because if you assert everything, we just don't really want to leave the warfighter or the unit with nothing after phase 2 is gone. So it really depends on, we just care more about the adaptation that you're making that we get our hands and can use. And then there might be a sustainment tail on that after phase 2 that we must pay for. That's fine, but we just don't want you to pull out everything that you adapted. Your core technology and commercial technology is yours. And that's why we're saying is, we're looking for companies that are really going after the commercial market, because you're just adapting a piece of that we can use in the DoD, but you're bolstering up your commercial product, and as long as it's linked to your commercial product, that's yours. And if that may not answer some of your needs on that, because this is always a huge issue, please reach out to us. I'll put you in contact with the patent lawyer, and she'll be able to answer all those questions. Go ahead.
I'll just add to that from my own personal experience. So coming into doing work with the military, Air Force, DoD, I was like under the assumption that it's like a zero-sum game. Like, I'm gonna fight for as much IP as I can get, and they're gonna fight for as much as they can get, and we're gonna throw dollar signs back and forth, and we'll end up somewhere in the middle. That's not what this is. The SBIR webpage says, America's seed fund. Like, you're aligned with the Air Force from day one. I believe that statement, right? So we asserted all the rights. I mean, we already have a commercial product, and it wasn't exhaustive. Like, there wasn't it said basically like everything, and that's all it said, like one sentence for all the assertions. That was it. It was like, we already have a viable commercial product, and it was that simple. I was worried we were gonna have to go through all of our code and like put 100 different line items. It was just like everything. So
Any other questions on MOUs before we move on to another topic that's troublesome sometimes? And let's talk about getting paid. So first talk about phase one, your experience and how you have to interact to get paid. And then we can talk to you about phase two as well.
Yeah, so the government has this thing called WAF.
You're gonna hate it.
W-A-W-F. It's basically a swear word.
It's wide area workflow.
So for a while, on the day and the afternoon where I was like, all right, I'm going to tackle this. You know, I started reading through stuff. I tried to figure it out on my own. It's like, shit. And you know what? I called the number, and I was like, I got a normal sounding human, probably from the Midwest where I'm from. By the accent, I could tell. Real nice person. And I was just like, hey, I'm a Ciber company. I've never done this. What is this? It's like, all right, man, let me just, here's what we're going to do. And literally step by step over the phone, I got from, first page to last page in probably 15 minutes and got paid. So call them. So establish that human connection again.
So there's a couple of things for this iteration. So there is a video. He says it's not that good, so we're going to redo it to do that video. We also have some people, some contracting officers that are going to assist on some of the calls. So I have a whole game plan for y'all on Fridays. Lesson plans that we'll introduce every week that we'll concentrate on. And that's one of them, is really understand. Another thing that I think is going to be beneficial for whoever gets to phase two is we always experiment with stuff here in AFWERX Austin and with the SBIR program. So this time when we awarded the AETC phase twos, we used a system called Payment Plus, and we're experimenting with that and see how they do, how they're going with that. And if it works out well, we're going to implement that in 19.3, and that would affect whoever goes to phase twos, and that would be tremendously helpful on there.
Venmo next.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else on pay that you want to discuss on that? Because it is a big concern. Y'all want to get paid, so it's always a concern of that.
Yeah, I mean, even with phase two, like I had a question on getting paid. I was under the assumption that you just get paid 25% in the first 2 weeks. So this is an iterative process. Like AFWERX is a startup too. So they're figuring it out as they go. And personally, that was like a relief to me to hear Leaf, the guy on the phone.
If you haven't met Leaf, he's on Union as well. He'd be tremendously helpful in business development. So
we're running fast with scissors. What was his line?
So yeah, pay's always a concern. Deliverable. So you have just the preliminary report. Leaf put on Union exactly what you need to deliver on that. One of the things is the final report deliverable. What we try and do for the final deliverable is have you mirror that as much as, it's a little bit backwards. Usually we have that due first, and we can provide some feedback for you so you can tweak it to do the phase two application, because we try and mirror that up exactly of what you need to put. This time, technically, the phase two application's due the 23rd, but your pay performance doesn't end until like 8 November. Some of you, if you don't have a contract right now, might be 16 November. So that means technically you don't need to provide that until after. We will provide an option if you want to give us a draft final deliverable about a week prior to the 23rd. You can provide that to us, and Ryan and I and some of the other team will go through that and provide you some input. What's additional about what's due in the final deliverable that I want y'all to be aware of is collecting data and touch points. Really provide how many people you had to talk to, where you made traction, did these events helpful? Because we actually read that and pull out summaries from that. And people like Pat and everything will be very upfront in providing feedback and what we need to do to improve that process. So that's very important to us to work with on those deliverables. Any questions on deliverables right now? That's usually another, yes? No, I got asked that last night. I'm going to keep it the 23rd. It's pretty much, okay, I'll say one lasting thing on these deliverables. I care about y'all getting to a phase 2 application and phase 3s. These deliverables are a mechanism that we have to be contractually bound with to make sure you deliver and get paid. So we treat it as such. So if you deliver it and it's within the spirit of what we want, that's what. Preliminaries, pretty much you've already done the majority of the vast majority of the work by doing your application. Just make any tweaks that you're going to attack this next couple of, or maneuver this next couple of months, and then put that in there. And that's really, the work is already done for preliminaries. Shouldn't be that difficult on that, for getting that in. Will you please talk about, we'll move on unless anybody else wants to talk about, I want him to talk about interacting for an application for phase 2 to put that application into the system and dealing with the SBIR website.
Are you just saying this so you can be like, well, Pat, great news. For our new companies, they won't have to. Yeah, I mean, it was horrible.
Do not wait to the last minute. That's bottom line. But he'll go ahead and talk about some of the nuances of that, but do not wait till the night of. And here's an example. If you get a signed MOU, there's a potential for this, and I think I ran this into 2 companies. If you get a signed MOU, but it's digitally signed, but you combine it into a PDF file, it's going to strip the digital signature, but they didn't double check it. I have to treat everyone fair when they put the applications in. So I get the application. If it doesn't have a signed MOU, I put you down as a non-signed MOU. So those are just some nuances, build in time, that attention to detail that we actually are trying, we're going to make the decision this week if we can move away from that system. We will be moving away from that system by 20.1. We're just trying to get to see if we can move away from. It's going to be a heartburn for you. I'm telling you, you're going to run into the problems with trying to submit your application. You're just going to want to email it to us directly. We can't do that because, 1, it's not written into the instructions to do that, and 2, it's not fair to everyone. We have to keep, and we're trying to keep track of your proposals to keep them confidential and keep them controlled so that not everyone gets them and sees them if they have access to our box or not. That's a reason why you can't just email it to us on that. Any other thoughts on the SBIR website?
I mean, I was going to say that it was a little bit of a relief during phase 1 as we put in our phase 2 proposal that you said if you had questions about things that we submitted, you wouldn't just downgrade us to non-sign MOU, but apparently, I don't know, that you would reach out and ask about it. So I think that put some relief there.
So I'll add some of that. So what we built in 19.2, and it worked marvelously, to be honest. So for 19.1, we had roughly, I submitted to the contracting team, I think about 160, 150 selects, and 125 were chosen. And it was all because their cage codes, their DUNS, they showed inactive in the system. It was just all these contracting issues that we're trying to award these contracts in such a short amount of time, they don't have time to really work with the companies. So in 19.2, what we did is, okay, we did the valuations, we provided it to the contracting teams to run a pre-contracting checklist, and then we were able to ask the companies for clarifications. And the companies were trying to, but you have to be responsive. So I'm going to do a better job this time of really messaging. You need to, no kidding, be available, because here's what will happen. You're the CEO of your company. You'll have the engineer submit the application. That engineer will put his personal email address. So we send it to that person to get these clarifications, and then you come as the CEO going, wait a minute, you didn't give us a chance. And we're like, we've been emailing this person this whole time. You put it in the system. We're trying to improve that by collecting those onboarding Google Sheets of getting all those emails. So we're going to combine that with when we send out those clarifications that we're sending it out to everyone so we can get those answered. Another thing in regards to the MOU is we did this time is we said, okay, you need to respond within 24 hours that you have a signed MOU. So you're not getting extra time, because it comes to an equal opportunity for everyone. So they'll be giving hard deadlines on certain items, so you are responsive and provide it. And if you miss that deadline, then I'm sorry, we just can't. That was the only way we're being fair to people on that. What we're doing for 19.3 that will affect y'all is we are embedding contracting teams in the evaluations. So a contracting member will be evaluating along with us and identifying problems right off the bat. That way I can go to the contracting officer and say, let's email this person due. To you, it's a little bit better because it's during due diligence. So I was more dealing with phase ones the due diligence that we can contact you and say, hey, please give us some clarification on these items. Anything else?
Yeah, just when it came towards like the end of your decision making for phase one going into phase two, there were times when I got an email and it was like, we need this in 2 hours. Okay.
What I feel sorry for these individuals that went through, to be honest, because
I don't know if that
we
was
did
normal.
not do a great job of aggregating the clarifications. So literally he could get a call, says, I need this information in 2 hours. You could get in another 2 hours, you could say, I need this by tomorrow morning. And it was just a stream of emails. And it wasn't fair to the startups at all. And we recognize that. So this time around, that's why we're going to have the contracting officers embedded so we can consolidate all the clarifications and just send it out at once saying we need this responses by this date instead of constantly getting the stream. There were startups working at 3 in the morning trying to get us information because we said we needed it by 7 in the morning the next day. And that's just not fair and it's not sustainable. Yes? No, his email.
So this is one thing I'll say. I got one of those, hey, we need this in 2 hours. And I was like, this is not going to happen. And, you know, it's black and white. It seems like everything's freaking black and white with you guys. There's no gray. But there is gray because humans are involved here. All right. So I called that person that sent that request. And it happened to be a real bubbly, young contracting officer. It was super cool. I was like, hey, you know, I'm trying to get this to you. Like, is it okay? It's probably going to take 2 more hours than you need. Oh, yeah, no, that's totally fine. It's all good. It's like, so that's not the vibe you get off that email.
And that's not the vibe you're going to get when talking, because you have to understand that's why I really wanted Jeff here talking about the control and processes. These individuals that when we're warning are very controlled process have to be fair to everyone. They have to give a deadline. I need this. So it seems all very black and white, but that's when they turn to me and my team, and our team's like, oh, well, we can massage this a little bit and trying to help you out. We're always looking for interest in helping the startups out. And it helps when you have individuals like Pat that can just call them and talk to them, and that's really what it's all about, is voicing your concern early and often. That will help us out to get that. And if you have suggestions along the way, well, you also talk about just navigating phase one. What were some of the biggest problems suggestions for them to think about and when trying to find in business development and making networking? What was?
Who here played baseball? All right. So what's a good average for like, getting a hit? It's like 200, 300. I mean, we started off phase one with like, let's say 10 good leads. You just heard by the end of it, I had a signed MOU the night before phase two was due. So, it is a game of numbers to some degree, but once you do find that person that, hopefully maybe one or two that you like really think you can do this with, stay on them and lock it down.
Yes, go ahead. Perfect. I love it. That's like I planted you right there to do this. This is an issue, not an issue in a bad way. It's an issue in a good way, but you need to work with us early and often on this. So this is awesome if you get multiple use. That's what we want. We want you to be able to. So what I would suggest, and I'm going to message this a little bit better this time, is don't get the sign right away. If you know for a fact you're on a pathway to signature from multiple people, let us know, because you can only submit a consolidated MOU with one signature. Yes. So, because let's think about this for a second. That signature is the MOU holder that's going to how you get paid and accept and reject your deliverables. So, that doesn't mean you can't work with multiple. What in some units don't even want to be the owner of that process, because basically you're getting provided the deliverable and then you have to say, I accept this, I reject it, and then they notify me, and that's how you get invoiced to get paid. You can invoice that and get paid for that. Now, if you have multiple people, multiple organizations, they can own particular milestones. So what I want you to do is, when you start talking these multiple units, is find out who's going to be the lead unit, because that's the most important thing. Who wants to own that phase two process? And then have those units start talking. And if you need to bring us in to help mediate that, let us know, because they need to start talking so the acceptor of those milestones doesn't arbitrarily accept it if you didn't deliver a milestone to some other unit. And then some units can even tag money to the particular milestone that they're trying to get delivered to. So there's in the template, there's extra information on people that are working on your milestones, but we only require that one signature for the consolidated MOU. We have to have that. So what's going to happen is, if you submit multiple, I'll be calling you and giving you one of those email deadlines that say, send us another milestone with this signed by a lead MOU holder. So don't ask them twice or three times. So that's the main thing I wasn't able to message last time, is they would get a signature. And not everyone has difficulty getting signatures like that. Some organizations are just have a more stringent process than others. They were able to get multiple signatures, and then they had to go back and have someone to sign again. Here's a tip for you, because I'm the one that does the due diligence calls. If I go into that due diligence call and no one knows who the lead unit is, that's going to reflect poorly on your application of getting in. If they have never even talked before, that's going to probably be poorly on your application. So just realize we want you to get them talking, and they will talk. It's just I think sometimes as you feel like you don't want them to talk, because you're going to see who gets to it first, and then ends up they both get it, and you're like, oh no, I have 5 people signing separate MOUs, but I need one consolidated milestone plan. Yes. The answer is yes, and that's what we want. So Here's the, and it's not submitting this to phase 3, is as a unit or, you know, an office, program office, they can just use the SBR authorities and put you on phase 3 contract. So here's an example. I was talking to someone earlier about this example. You have a commercial product, and say your signer of your MOU wants you to make this ruggedized, waterproof adaptation of your product. But you talk to someone else and they say, oh, I could use your commercial product right now. Well, you're a phase 1 company. They can go direct to phase 3. You could have 10 phase 3s, 20, with multiple units going sole sourcing while you're still developing out to satisfy that particular signer of that MOU for that prototyping. So yes, we want that. That's how we're being evaluated on, is to get you that transition. Go ahead.
Two quick questions. So, does getting a phase 3 make you ineligible for matching on a phase 2 if you haven't had a phase 2 before?
No, it doesn't. Actually, I'll finalize it, but the expectation is that we'll leverage those funds even.
Awesome. And then can you speak to the success rate of people with a signed MOU that got to select from the business side before contracting issues? How competitive is that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's hard to tell. I'll give you just some impressions, because we had directive phase 2, which is different. I won't mention them because when you come into phase 1, that is a competitive process. But when you go to phase 2, that's really not a competitive process. So the directive phase 2, they had a higher bar because they were treated almost as phase 1 criteria of being competitive against each other. So phase 2, I really do try and do a good job of like trying to really understand this phase 2. So for the 117, 120 that came through, I did due diligence call this time on 80 of them. So a lot. I really wanted to, it's stiff competition. One of the things that we have volume, but the quality is there. It's awesome. So out of that 120, we probably will end up awarding around 60, 55, 60-ish. So almost 50% just on that. The directive phase 2 might be a little bit lower. I don't know, but it's different also. There's different percentages if you have leveraging versus traditional. If you have leveraging funds, you're going to be at a higher rate of acceptance. If you are not, and that's one of the things I was going to ask him on a question here coming up, is if you're just going for traditional, you're going to have a lower acceptance rate. The reason why is we're rewarding units and rewarding companies that can go and get that private capital, that can work with the government units that put in their buy-in for that. So, Pat, will you please talk about your decision? Were you a rapid or not, and what led you to that decision to do or not?
Yeah, so I saw some of you guys smile when you heard like 50, 60%. You're like, oh, we're real stringent. That's pretty good. Like back to baseball, that's awesome. So we did not have matching funds rapid. I think part of it was like just, you know, timing budget cycles. They were like, sorry, we blew through all our budget. We're going to replenish in September after you get the phase 2. So, you know, you said 90% success rate with units or MOUs that have funding associated with it. And I was like, man, I really need to try and get funding. But, you know, we had a 2-star general sign on, multiple commanders are MOU, so that hopefully strengthened it. But it obviously made getting the signatures harder. So
that's a good point he just brought up is, you know, we try and compete all the rapids, not compete, but we evaluate those and rank those in the rapids, and then all traditionals, but we try and allocate more budget towards the rapids. So on he was competing more with the traditionals, and he just had higher buy-in. You know, part of his sale was, hey, we have a person that can go to bat to sustain this if it works out in the phase 2, very high up. And so that's why I'm saying I encourage you to get that Air Force customer that as high up as possible. And that's why we're doing events like this. And the program offices are now getting involved in sending that signal that, hey, we do support this program. Any questions? But yes, go ahead. No, you cannot use your own funds to match. So let's talk on this matching stuff a little bit, because I'll give you expectations of what I think is going to change towards, because this is what I'm fighting for, because it gets a little confusing. Technically, you have to have the investor, the third-party investor, sign a document that says, at the very least, they can give you money now during your phase one, but they could at the very least need to say, if you are selected for a phase two, we will provide this much money to the startup that can be utilized towards a phase two. What I'm pushing for is that the CEO of the company can make that decision, because technically you can, because the private investor gives you the money to use as necessary, and we just need some documentation from the CEO of the company saying, I'll allocate some of this money to go towards a phase two. So I'm pushing towards that. I'm also pushing that it can be in the form of like an email, or it doesn't have to be an official document, stuff like that. So I would expect somewhere around that, because that's what I'm going to be pushing hard for. Yes.
Could it also come from a customer/strategic partner that isn't investing but is giving non-dilutive capital?
No, it needs to be part of them buying equity into yours. So you can do convertible notes and stuff like that, but it needs to be a buy-in into your company on that. Yes, in the back. In 19.2, we did not differentiate that, but that's something that we're going to look at for this next cycle to figure out if we want to reward units more than the private investment. What I did for this last cycle is I sort of did threshold of how much a certain amount that would put them in a different category within the DoD and then within the private side. But I didn't really compare the two. We just said if they had funding for the leveraging. 90 days. So it's government and private investment, 90 days of contract award. So for instance, we send you a contract on 1 November. You would have 90 days to prove that you got the money.
But that starts now, phase one?
No, it starts from if you're awarded a phase two.
Okay, so investments that come now, in phase one do not count?
No, they do. But I'm saying, what's the very latest? So you can take money right now as a phase one company and count that in leveraging. What I'm saying is the latest is that, say, a private investor says, I will provide capital if you get a phase two. That clock, 90 days, starts when you get your contract. Yes. Oh, good. Anyone else? Ooh, let's start about there. Yeah, so what we're doing for 19.3 right now is maintaining a 1-for-1 match with private investment. No, the unit, it was 4-to-1, but it's going to go probably to 2-to-1. That's what some of our discussions we're going to make right now. I think there was another question. Yes, go ahead. Oh, okay, yes. Yeah, and Pat can jump in here, but this last round, we left it more on the company to lay out the expectation. This round, I'm going to get more involved with my team in laying out that expectation, because that I did observe that as a problem area where they just didn't know fully of how involved they needed to be, or to how, because I really left it up to the companies and the units to have that conversation, because that's who you're going to be working with in phase 2. We try and remove ourselves from that. And then just as a note, you will have more of a heavy hand involved in that management if you are with a focus area. So the way we're moving to now is to have focus areas where it's a PEO office backed. They can provide the PM support, they can provide the contracting support, the SMEs, and they are choosing you as a phase 2 and helping you along that process. You're going to actually improve your support for that with the, yes, go ahead. Let me see if I answer. Tell me if I answer your question by saying you can apply, but I probably won't be selecting you if you don't have a signed MOU.
No, I guess what I mean, well, I'll ask about timing as well. If we were able to get a signed MOU before even the October date, or even potentially secure funds before that date, should we try and submit before, or is it?
Okay, good point. One of the things that we opened up and have we haven't advertised this, but on a case by case, say you meet a user that wants to move faster than your end of your performance period, we'll work with you on getting, if truly they want to sign an MOU and they want to award, we'll get you to help you out to award a phase 2 before you'll still have that base performance, because you can still get business development to get phase 3s from people, so you'll still be under contract to do that. But and then once you get phase 2, your contract continues. Yes.
Does pricing work on a phase 3? Is it just go off a published price, and you negotiate that with the customer?
Yeah, I'm going to bring on a contracting officer on the calls, and will you please ask the contracting officer that question on that? Thanks. Yes.
Can you talk to the phase 2 application process and how it relates to the pitch day? That in our case, we're having to sustain an office, told us the pitch day is in November. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so here's pitch days are brand new to us, so please, sorry for a lot of confusion, because there is some confusions. For instance, I think 19.2005 that Space Camp runs, they actually take their phase 1s and choose it. But a lot that are wrapped under our 001s, here's the processes. I've been working with all the focus areas. They've given us a signal of, hey, bring these companies in. What they're going to reach out to you, probably starting next week, and they're going to say, hey, start submitting. There's going to be a deadline where they're going to have you asked to start submitting material. We're leaving it up to them to exact what materials they are going to have you submit. So then you will be invited to their pitch day, where they'll start doing the behind the scenes, getting ready and evaluating you, where they can award you a contract for a phase 2 at that time. Now, the way that it happens with us is, say you don't go to any pitch days and you just want to get apply for a phase 2 at the end of your performance, then the AFWERX team will evaluate you, and we have our set application process. So that's really how it's going to happen. Does that answer it? Yep. Go ahead.
So a lot of the pitch days are actually after the phase 2 are due.
Yes. You bring up a good point. I'm still investigating that one, but the bottom line is you'll be able to apply both, and you'll be able to apply for ours and then go to the pitch day. We're not going to award until the pitch days are over, so just expect that. We will not conclude for this one, so it will be a little bit delayed this round because of the Thanksgiving and the holidays. We will award before the holidays for Christmas, but it will be after the pitch day. So you can apply to ours. I'm still working out the details on that, but what I would expect is you can apply to the general. I'll wait to the pitch day and then deconflict with if the pitch day picked you as a phase 2 and just take you off our list.
Okay, so they can also.
The focus areas are going to have the priority. They're gonna have, so you will. We told them you will. No one owns you on the focus areas, so you can be invited to all the pitch days. But once you're awarded a phase 2, that sort of takes you off the list for everyone else to put a phase 2, except for enhancements. But that's a separate process where you can enhance your phase 2 to accommodate another user. Is that not answering?
Just to clarify, so AFWERX can award phase 2 in October?
No. We are not going to award anything until all the pitch days are done. So I think there's one in December. We will not. AFWERX is not going to award anything until the pitch days are done. We'll take all those and cross-reference them with our applications for that submitted on 23 October. And if they were awarded at one of the pitch days, we won't even evaluate them. They're going to have their own teams evaluating at the pitch days. It's not going to be an AFWERX team. Right.
You can and should do both if you can.
I'm expecting, I'm going to get clarification, but I'm expecting you to do both because there are some pitch days after that deadline, and it only makes sense to me that you can apply to both. Realistically, if you apply, I'm going to evaluate it, and then I'm going to stand by for the pitch day, and if they choose you, then I'll just take you off the list if you were a select for me. Yes? I haven't been to one either, so not run by the SBIR at least. That will be coming out for the particular pitch day focus area. So starting next week, the focus areas of those pitch days are going to start reaching out to the companies they're interested in. I would encourage you, if you feel like you really apply, like you need, you want them to take another look at you, contact them so they can evaluate you as far as, hey, maybe we need to consider this person and invite them to the pitch day. They're going to have their own mechanism of how they run their own pitch day, and that's why Dr. Roper really wanted to open it up and not us control it. They're controlling their own pitch day. We're just providing the funnel for you all to come in, and now anyone can put you on a phase 3 contract and a phase 2. Yes.
In order to get awarded for phase 2, there's no min or max, right? We don't anticipate needing a lot of funding.
Ah, good, yes.
And if it helps get maxed, why don't I?
100%. Great question. So again, you are technically, being evaluated within the traditional sense of if you say you don't need funding, you're also going to, I'm going to advise you state, I don't need funding. I don't need to apply for Rapid in my pitch deck. My user only needed this amount of requirement. I can deliver that on that. So just articulate that in your pitch deck, in your technical doc.
And that'll increase our chance.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
And just to kind of hinge off that, is there on the one-on-one investor matching, is there a minimum amount of money that the investor has to put in to be
The answer right now is no. That's the expectation. It was no 19.2. We're meeting today and tomorrow, and we'll decide. But I anticipate the answer is going to be no. Did you have any final words, final tips for them? Because we have to close up. We'll maybe take one or two more questions, but I just want to make sure Pat gets.
Yeah, I mean, my final question to you, and this still.
No, it's to them. Not.
Well.
He's technically a phase 2 company right now. So.
Well, no, I'd say what is the biggest one criteria that you guys use to say, hey, this person should be a phase 2 or not?
Great. I think that's actually perfect because that's one of my messaging goals. It's all about transition and sustainment. You're going to be excited to get an MOU signed, but you need to articulate, start having those conversations start talking to the right people. At the very least, start identifying the right people and articulate that in your application that says, hey, this is my phase 2 plan, but this is where I'm going after. This is how it's going to expand out. Even if you haven't secured it, it's more, how have you thought about it? Have you spoken with your end user? Do you see a pathway? Are there multiple pathways? How do you see that expanding out? I would say that's the most important criteria of everything that we're looking at for that phase 2 application, is us assessing the probability of that transition beyond SBIR dollars, because ultimately that's how all these programs are going to get evaluated by Department of Defense, especially the Air Force. When since I fall into Air Force, is can we deliver capability to the end user, the warfighter, and sustain that pathway to them for the use. That's what we're going to be. So it's awesome that you can get a phase 2 MOU signed and a user wants to use it, but we need to find that sustainment piece, that tail end. And the better you can articulate it to us, the better your chances of getting a phase 2. One more question if you have it. Otherwise, we're done on this. Thank you very much for joining this. Hope you make the best of these other aspects. I also encourage you to come into the last panel of today. That one's going to be a good one as well. Thank you.
Thanks. No. Here, I got it.
Don't go too far. We're about to start pitches here in just a few minutes.